The Egyptian Sphinx is one of the most famous ancient sculptures in the world. But how much do you really know about it? In general, who really knows something about it? It turns out that much more is known about the Sphinx than you can imagine. Perhaps you won't notice how much you didn't know about it until you saw this video. Let me explain a theory that many people have advocated, but no one has been able to prove that there is a secret passage or tunnel leading to the cellar in the basement of the Sphella in the basement of the Sphinx. This is a version of Simpson, a historian who is convinced that under the statue there is a passage associated with the pyramids of Giza. Simpson is convinced that a secret passage was discovered during an archaeological dig in 1837 and that Egyptologist Colonel Howard Wyse was a witness to the incident. But for some reason Wyse's team was forced to keep the discovery a secret. Simpson's theory seemed absurd until a secret tunnel was discovered under the Giza Plateau in 2019. And if there is a tunnel there, it should be connected somewhere. If we assume that the internal cavity of the Sphinx had some purpose, the connection between the pyramid and the nearby sculptures is perfectly reasonable, but the question of why archaeologists and the colonel were ordered to keep this public secret remains a mystery. There is also a less suspicious description that the sculpture of the Sphinx was carved from a single rock, but from its impressive size, it does not seem to be true until the Sphinx became the size we see today. The monument, carved from a piece of limestone, probably processed by hundreds of workers, is 73 meters long and 20 meters high, but in fact, it is not so modern. There are no inscriptions on the Sphinx that indicate who made it, and there is a theory that it was made by aliens. Generally accepted archaeological and historical theories suggest that the original face of the Sphinx was the face of Pharaoh Khafra, but many disagree with this view. The animal had no special status in ancient Egyptian culture, while the dog had a status on the contrary. Thanks to Anubis, let's take another look at the silhouette of the Sphinx. Its flat back and leg position will remind you of other dogs. Moments to consider. Anubis was considered the protector of the necropolis. If anyone thinks that the Giza Plateau is a necropolis, the sculpture of Anubis looking at it is very understandable. It has already been said that the Sphinx does not have an inscription. If we abandon the theory of Anubis and assume that it is a statue of Pharaoh Khafra, the Sphinx should have been made between 2558 and 2558 and 2532 AD, but there is no reliable evidence to prove it. About the Sphinx, one of the largest sculptures in the world and the oldest monument sculpture in Egypt, no consensus has been reached on what its true purpose is or who built it. It is known that it was called the Temple of Harimakit in the New Kingdom, but it is unlikely that the Sphinx sculpture was first called this name. However, the lack of a record of the construction of the statue and its name among civilizations that had such detailed records raises suspicion and makes us wonder if these manuscripts were destroyed, or if so, why. The most common theory about what happened to the Sphinx's nose is that the army of the French Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte broke the nose of the sculpture during a military battle near Giza during the invasion of Europe in 1798, according to some history textbooks. Although Makrizi, the Sphinx has been missing since the 15th century and may not have been long before Al-Makreshi claims that the nose was destroyed by a Fatimite sheikh named Muhammad Sain al-Dahar. But there is no evidence that the Sphinx nose was originally an African-American face and originated from the ancient Egyptians. The most likely theory is that the Europeans deliberately broke it to prove that they were black. According to geologist Robert Shaw, the erosion seen on the side of the Sphinx appears only after regular rains over thousands of years. According to Shaw, the erosion destruction is about 12,000 years old. If it could prove that it was unthinkable and all our ideas about Egyptian history could not be considered. It is worth noting that Fairshaw's colleagues, categorically many we agree with him, and do not consider his theory frivolous, but the fact that water damage is generally displayed in the Sphinx makes us think about some unpleasant questions that conventional versions still cannot answer. But one of the most amazing facts about the Sphinx in the 18th century is that it was not visible to the naked eye. First is once again proves why the theory that Napoleon broke his nose is not true. Until 1798, this monument was completely buried in the Egyptian sand, but when it began to emerge from the sand, people discovered that this Sphinx existed in the 1920s. It took 10 years for French engineer Émile Barrès to begin excavations. In 1936, for the first time, modern humans were able to look through the Sphinx. 150 years ago, Italian researcher Giovanni Caviglia and French archaeologist Auguste Mariette tried several times to excavate the statue, but both were shocked by the scale of their work and had to abandon it. The Sphinx, incidentally, was found buried deep, the same as assuming that one day the sand might rise and swallow the Egyptian pyramids. This monument was definitely made for a purpose, but it is not yet known who did it and why. There is also a theory that the Sphinx really lacks a part of the head. That is, it used to have a complete outline of the forehead and the upper part of the skull. There was a beard on the chin. The nose of the Sphinx is badly damaged. But to be honest, the rest of the face is also not at its best, because it has been standing in the desert for at least 4,500 years. But such destruction is not due to natural phenomena, but someone scratched or altered the face of the sculpture. In the photo published in 2022, the face of the Sphinx appears to be closed eyes. Numerous images, it may seem, the sculpture is standing with eyes closed. Spread on social networks, some people also seem to be asleep. They declare signs of the impending apocalypse. But most likely there is a very simple explanation of this miracle. There are only two options for it. The first photo of the Sphinx with its eyes closed, taken at a very special angle. This is just an optical illusion. And the second option is someone processed the original image in Photoshop. Earlier, he said that the Sphinx may have had a beard. However, I admit that this is more of a fact than a conjecture. It is known that part of the beard is kept in the British Museum. This is one of the few ancient Egyptian artifacts in the British Museum that, to be honest, should not be there. The official view of history says that in the 19th century, a fragment of a beard was found between the front paws of the Sphinx. But it turns out that's not true, because the front paws of the Sphinx were buried under a layer of sand until the 1930s. Recently, there has been a stir and surprise that the history of the statue is as full of holes as its ancient history. Still, the Sphinx beard exists. There is a campaign in Egypt to re-glue all the parts of this sculpture together to the monument. The most important thing that we did not know about the Sphinx before and now know is that he observes with certainty how older than the pyramids, except for the general opinion that perhaps we no longer have the opportunity to find the age of the Sphinx. The age difference is thousands of years. Perhaps the monument was built somewhere around 2600 BCE, before Pharaoh Khafra. But if we talk about age over 9,000 years, we will have to rule out the idea that it was built by the ancient Egyptians in general, or at least in our current understanding, which some theorists have talked about. It's not the same as saying about the effects of the alien construction we want, but it makes us wonder who lived on this earth before them. Perhaps the bigger mystery is why this Sphinx was carved, and what was his goal there. We all saw pictures of this world, famous landmark, but how many people would have thought if this was really an image of Khafra, why it was needed? It also seems a bit strange, even by the standards of the Egyptian pharaohs. If it was conceived as a giant sculpture of Anubis, which would set a serious precedent if it were made, why it was broken, why the head was much smaller than the rest, what happened to the original head, why there was no book to show that this sculpture was made, what was a high goal at the moment the sculpture appeared, or what was the is it just an impressive giant ruins showing the power and influence of a particular pharaoh at a particular time? We cannot answer these questions, but we hope that you will have the same questions and enjoy a visit to this most enigmatic monument in Egypt. If you like this video, do not forget to rate, subscribe to the channel and click on the bell. For me, your activity is the best reward. Thanks for your attention. See you soon. Goodbye.